Continuing on with the theme of ancient prehistoric weirdness, I thought I'd cover another species that I'm sure most people will never have heard of, and certainly a species most people probably wouldn't wish to be revived and reintroduced into the wild. I realize quite a disproportionate share of my content so far seems to cover creatures which are likely to induce mild bouts of abject insectoid horror. Though I promise this isn't consciously intentional on my part, I just seem to find them too bizarre not to discuss, especially as the central theme of these last few videos is strangeness. Insects on their own invoke strong reactions of disgust and aversion in many people, let alone an enormous winged predatory one like the subject of this video. It is a reality that many of us take for advantage this mild, tepid, easygoing world we inhabit. In truth, for much of its history, it hasn't been nearly as inviting to the soft human palate. All throughout the annals of evolutionary history, you'll find organisms as off-putting as this one. The cabal of fanged ferocity, poisonous pugilists, and stinging scallywags that have populated the rocky outcrops and azure depths of this planet existed in profusion. But many of those species, I'm sure, would probably have a throng of enthused eco-tourists who would be more than happy to see them brought back to life. I would have a hard time imagining this creature receiving the same treatment, other than perhaps from the most rabid paleozoologists. This is Meganeura, or rather a member of the genus known as Meganeura. There are, comfortingly, more than one variety of predatory mega insect. This genus was most prolific sometime around 300 million years ago. Something about this time period really seemed to encourage the development of monstrous nightmare beasts. A few of the species that I've covered so far which were famed for their strangeness existed in this period. Meganeura are the close relatives of modern dragonflies, resembling them quite closely in anatomy. Having said that, I should caution that modern understanding of many of the representatives of genus Meganeura are sketchy at best, and any of the information shared here is most accurate to the mind of researchers as of today, but should be taken with a grain of salt. What can be discussed with relative certainty is what has been elucidated to us through the purely probabilistic good fortune of random high-quality fossil preservations. As a result, we do know, for example, that they must have had what are known as compound eyes, a feature common to many distinct clades of arthropod, useful in their ability to capture large volumes of optical information about their surroundings, though admittedly this information tends to be quite low resolution. The compound eyes of Meganeura tended to cover a large proportion of the upper surface of the head, with eyes that sort of conjoined at the midpoint of the head, along the plane of bilateral symmetry. This, whilst on its own isn't too frightening a trait, is frightening due to the fact that it likely made organisms of Meganeura quite adept hunters, leaving its chosen quarry with few options in the way of evasion and escape. Thinking on it now, it's a good job there aren't any insectoid predators of humans. The combination of fast, high-flying maneuverability and the enormous visual field the compound eyes grant would have made a fictitious man-eating bug a true nightmare to coexist with. But obviously, the truly remarkable feature of Meganeura specimens was not their fascinating eyesight or their weird Salvador Dali-style eyes. It was the fact that they were absolutely humongous. Easily some of the largest insects the fossil record has any knowledge of. It touted a wingspan of up to 75 centimeters, with an estimate of each individual wing measuring up to 32 centimeters. The vertical body length of hypothesized adult specimens of Meganeura are thought to have been roughly 75 centimeters also. You know, for all my earlier talk of this thing never being brought back, the UN's bug-eating initiative would make a lot more sense if these things were still around. The mass estimates for one of the larger species of Meganeura, that of Meganeura monyi, have varied quite considerably over time, with the earlier estimates of its mass having been quite low and likely to have been underestimates. In the late 20th century, it was proposed that M. monyi might have weighed as little as roughly 17 grams, as this was thought to have been the upper limit for a weight that could be supported by an insect of its size whilst also remaining capable of flight. More modern estimates, however, place the weight of this species at between 100 and 150 grams. This figure acknowledges the weight constraints placed upon the creature by such a burdensome mass, by providing the caveat that it likely would have suffered from a strong threat of overheating during flight, therefore theorizing that it likely would have flew in short, sustainable bursts. There is not much consensus on exactly why Meganeura grew to be as large as they did. There exist theories which posit that the concentration of atmospheric oxygen at the time of the Carboniferous being as elevated as it was is what facilitated the opportunity for these insects to attain their size. Apologies if that was a bit too word salady for you. I do need to work on saying more with fewer words. But that theory is contested, however, as there do exist similarly large species of insects which persisted in geologic periods whose atmospheric oxygen was much more paltry than that of the Carboniferous. Other theories that attempt to account for its size state that the lack of airborne vertebrate predators during the Carboniferous period created a viable niche in which huge insects could feasibly exist without the ability to shelter and hide in small, obscure locations from predators. But even these theories are not particularly well supported and do not enjoy support from many other researchers in the field. I suppose that Meganeura is just so puzzling a creature that even modern science can't really account for it.